No matter what the price of your camera might be, whether it's a small pocket camera like the one here, or something much more expensive like this full frame Canon camera right here, you have to follow specific rules to get sharp images. Just because you have an expensive setup, an amazing camera and lens, it does not automatically mean that your photos will be sharp. If you do not know what you're doing, your photos will just look average. So I follow these 5 simple tips to make sure that every single photo that I take, regardless of what camera I'm using, is always sharp. So that's a brief description of what we'll be going through in today's video. Let's get started. The most common reason why people's photos are not sharp is because they have not selected a fast enough shutter speed for the given subject. This is nearly always the case when it comes to blurry images. If your shutter speed is not fast enough, this will lead to 2 big issues. Number 1, you will need a fast enough shutter speed to freeze your subject's moving motion in your frame. Action sports, racing cars, wildlife, all need faster shutter speeds than an object that is not moving. If your shutter speed is not fast enough and your subject is moving through the frame whilst the shutter is open, this will create a blurry image. And second, if you are holding your camera in your hands, you will need a fast enough shutter speed that will counter the movement of your hands. Some people's hands are a lot more steadier than others. The best thing to do is to always take some test shots. Set your shutter speed to what you think will work. For example, in street photography, I would always start at around 1/250 of a second and take around 3 photos. I will then zoom into each image to make sure that they are nice and sharp. If they are not, I will simply increase my shutter speed and repeat the process. For fast moving subjects like sports, wildlife, I would always start at 1/400. Again, the same principle. Take some photos, zoom in and check that they are sharp. If not, increase your shutter speed and repeat the process. Remember, the faster the moving subject, the faster your shutter speed will need to be to freeze that subject in motion. Always, and I mean always, no matter what kind of photography that you are doing, always do a test shot and follow the above process. I have learned the hard way because when I first started photography, I did not follow any process at all. I remember getting home only to find that most of my photos were blurry and I couldn't figure out why. You can now learn from all of my mistakes. The simple process of doing some test shots and then adjusting your settings if needed will save you a lot of time and a lot of headache. Trust me. To have sharp images, sharp photos, you will need to make sure that your subject or whatever it is that you are taking a photo of is in focus. A very common issue that we find here is that most cameras have 2 autofocus settings, 2 systems, and a lot of people do not know what they are. The first is referred to as one shot. This focuses and freezes the focus on a single point, a single plane, so that if you were to move, you would then need to refocus again. The second is called autofocus continuous. This system follows the subject wherever it goes and keeps it in focus. One shot autofocus, which freezes the focus on a single plane, is best used for static subjects. Things like architecture, landscape, anything, still life and so on. You will see your focus point turn green and you will hear a small camera beep once the focus is set. For moving subjects, you will need the area of focus moving with your subject. This is best used for sports, cars, wildlife, or any subject that is moving through the scene. This is called autofocus continuous, or AFC. On Canons, it is called servo mode. To get sharp images, you need to take photos in the best available light at the time of taking your photos. This is because we see sharpness in the details, and we see more of these details when there are contrasts between light and dark areas of the image. To get this contrast, you will need light coming from an angle into your frame. You do not want light coming from the same direction as your camera, for example. This would be flat lighting. You also do not want light coming from behind the subject. This would be called backlighting. Here is an example of side lighting that shows how this type of light will help define the details in your subject, and this will make it look a lot sharper to the human eye. You can achieve this look with natural sunlight, a flash stick, or even LED light panel. Any light source will do. It just depends on your subject and the light source available at the time. On an overcast day, it will create flat lighting. This will not help when it comes to showing off the fine details of the image, as we have already gone over previously. Here is an example of a photo that I took on an overcast day. You can see that the photo looks flat. This does not mean that it's a bad photo at all, but what it does mean that it is not super sharp. Here is a photo that I took with directional light coming from the right side of the frame. You can clearly see the contrast between the light areas and the dark areas of the subject. This reveals a lot more detail and makes the image look sharper. Now, to get sharp images, it also helps to shoot at your lens's sharpest aperture. Most lenses are sharper at the center of the lens than out on the edges. This is most definitely the case with wider lenses like a 16mm, for example. This also does depend on the quality of your lens. By reducing the size of the aperture by selecting a higher f-stop like f12 or f14, 16 and so on, you are letting less light into the camera and using the part of the lens that is the highest quality, which will produce the sharpest photo. You'll need to experiment with this, as every camera body and lens combination will differ. You can do a simple experiment at home by simply taking an object, placing it on a table, make sure that the subject is well lit, then placing your camera on a tripod and taking some photos at different apertures: f4, f6, f8, f10, f12, f16, and so on. You can then download these to your computer and compare the sharpness of each photo. You can also do a search online, as you will most definitely find that someone has already done this for you and your lens. How you hold your camera is very important when it comes to getting sharp images. If you are moving your camera around whilst taking photos, it will definitely add blur to your images, especially at lower shutter speeds. Earlier we spoke about higher shutter speeds compensating for handheld movement. This is very true. If you could also add good camera technique, this will definitely help in creating sharper photos. You should always use tripods for slower shutter speeds, unless you are trying to be creative and create camera blur on purpose. Tripods are great for architecture, landscape, and still life. If we are out doing street photography, we are most likely going to be holding our cameras in our hands, as we want to be fluid and react to the environment around us. In this case, we want to improve our camera technique. Number one, we want to keep the camera nice and still, so that our subjects stay in the same place in our frame whilst we open the shutter and take that photo. A good way to do this is by having your right hand on the camera body and your left hand underneath the camera lens. This is very important when using a zoom lens like this 24-70, for example. This will help support the full weight of the camera and the lens setup at the same time. What you don't want to be doing is holding both your hands on the camera body, like so. This will make the camera top heavy, so when you're taking a picture, it is more likely to shake. Next, once we've got our first step sorted, we can then tuck our elbows into our body. This will help support the camera and stop any unwanted camera movement. Next, we can press our eye against the viewfinder and shoot using the viewfinder only. This is a lot more stable than using the back LCD screen. And it will also save a lot of battery, as your camera's LCD screen will eat a lot more battery power. Now, the only reason that I do not use the viewfinder when I'm doing my photography videos is because I want to show you exactly what I'm seeing. So it feels like you are actually there with me on the streets. If you're taking photos of a moving subject, like in sports or maybe wildlife, you will want to move your entire body and pan with the subject. Tuck your elbows in and pan with the subject, like so. You do not want your arms out and then trying to move with the subject like this. This is going to create a lot more camera shake. Now, make sure that you apply these tips so that you can get sharper photos. The most important tip is your shutter speed. Always make sure you've got a fast enough shutter speed to freeze your subject in your frame. And remember, your shutter speed can never be too fast. Another thing to remember is that you do not always want super sharp photos. For example, in beauty photography, if the photo is super sharp, we will see all the fine little details and imperfections of the skin that we don't really want to see. You need to learn these tips so that you understand how to get sharp photos when you need them. You can then concentrate on being more creative with your camera and not worrying about all the boring technical stuff. Okay, so there are my 5 best tips on how to get sharp images. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. It costs you nothing at all, and it really helps support the channel so that I can continue producing free videos just like this for you. Click on this video right here to see me out on the streets of London capturing that minimalist photography look. Until next time, get out there and take those photos.